the first speaker is Sergio Tapias from SciPost. The title of his presentation is Reproducible Research and Reform Publishing Infrastructures.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Sergio Tapias. I am Executive Director at SciPost. And today I'm going to discuss the topic of reproducibility from the perspective of a scientific publisher that already takes efforts into making science more open. So I will discuss reproducible research and reformed publishing infrastructures. I would like to begin by giving my perspective of what is the role of a scientific publisher in the reproducibility discussion. I think we play two key roles. The first one being that we provide tools to the scientific community that allow you to check for the reproducibility of a given result. We are the ones reporting the scientific results you're going to check, and we are the ones who can obtain from the authors and distribute to the community the data and software that is used in this research. The second role, where we have more of a responsibility, is that we run the peer review process. In this process, we should be asking ourselves, have the authors provided the necessary data and the necessary software to back up their claims and to allow other researchers to reproduce these results? Are the data and software that they provide enough to do so? And moreover, the referee process is a first opportunity to actually check for the reproducibility of the results. Due to these specific roles, the editorial policies that each journal has great potential to enable and empower the scientific community in their reproducibility efforts, but the wrong policies can also have a negative impact, and it can stifle efforts in reproducing results. So what are the policies that SciPost follows? Well, SciPost is a publishing platform. It's a grassroots initiative that started in 2016 in Amsterdam. We are a non-profit organization. All of our business relies on serving the scientific community and not ourselves. And we run, all of our journals are under what we call the genuine open access principles. One of which is that we do not charge article processing charges. And of course, these are open access journals, so you don't have to pay subscription fees either. No subscribe to open, no conditions on paying us to publish. As another point that I think has a big impact on reproducibility is that we run an open peer witness refereeing process, which I will describe later. And a point that we have vaguely touched on yesterday, which is the intellectual property. As a policy, everything that we published has copyright that remains with the authors, and it is published with a Creative Commons license that allows the broad reuse of the content. Now, let me focus on the first point. How do these policies enable the scientific community to actually reproduce results and replicate results? Well, the first one is that if you want to study a result, you need to be able to read it. But if it is hidden behind a paywall, you may have trouble accessing these results, accessing the data, the protocols that were followed, the software that is necessary for this. On the other hand, let's say that you do have access to the paper, you do your own follow-up work, maybe you have a rebuttal that you want to publish, maybe you have an alternative explanation for these results. And now you have to choose whether you will publish it in a journal behind the subscription wall yourself, or if you're gonna go for open access, but then you face the extra burden that most open access journals will charge you an article processing charge. And this may discourage some researchers to do follow-up work, to do reproducibility work, replication work. How do we overcome this in SciPost? Well, our business model is a consortial model where the organizations that are interested in our activities sustain us by giving us a voluntary donation. And we report back to them on our finances. How do we spend our resources, how much resources we have, where we have obtained it from. and which share of these resources is being used in the publishing of the papers associated to that organization. And this funding stream is detached from the editorial aspect, where we sustain our relationship with the scientific community simply by publishing the results based only on the scientific merits and not on their budgets. And just as a remark, if you're interested or your organization is interested in sponsoring us, you can reach out to sponsors@scipost.org. Now, the main point where I think SciPost has a very valuable contribution to the reproducibility discussion is our open peer review process. Traditional peer review is quite opaque. When a paper is published, you don't really know why it has been published. What was the motivation for the journal to accept this paper? You don't know the criticisms that it has received throughout the reviewing process, and whether or not the authors have addressed it in a satisfying way. That's where we implement our peer witness refereeing, which is more than just transparent refereeing. We don't only publish the referee reports after a decision has been taken. The referee reports are available online while we're still considering the paper. They are published next to the preprint of the paper itself. That allows the scientific community to have oversight on how the refereeing process is being handled. And more importantly, we don't only allow the invited referees to pitch in and give their opinions on a paper that we're considering. This process is open for anybody in the scientific community. If you have something to say about this paper, you can volunteer your referee report while we're still evaluating the paper. We will take it into account just as we take into account invited referee reports. Why wait until after the paper has been published to blow your whistle if you can do it during the evaluation of the process of the paper itself? Now, going back to the next point that I was speaking about, copyright, intellectual property. To which extent you can use the results that are being shown to you by a journal depends on the copyright license that comes attached to it. In SciPost, we use the permissive licenses, CC by 4.0 on these days. This means that all the results that we publish, all the software, all the data, all the plots can be reused. You can use the plots of our papers right next to your reproduction attempts to compare them directly without paying anyone a licensing fee to do so. Of course, you are only required to attribute the credit to the original source. And as I said before, we still protect the author's intellectual property by letting them keep their copyright by policy. SciPost will never take the copyright away from the authors. The discussion does not limit itself to just papers, but more importantly, it also touches software. Whether you're able to reproduce a result depends on whether you're able to use the software. We encourage our authors to publish their software, their code snippets with permissive licenses that will allow you to reuse it, build upon it. And we do recognize that sometimes there can be a lack of incentive for scientists who have already spent a lot of time building their code, maybe maintaining a very elaborate package or library. What's the incentive for them to make it public? Well, SciPost wants to reward these scientists by providing a publishing venue for their software itself. If you have built a library, a package, an implementation of an algorithm, you can publish this code base in SciPost Physics code bases, along with a documentation paper where you will describe the software, you will describe how it works, some benchmarks that you may want to do, how it is to be installed, etc. And both the documentation and the code itself will be peer-reviewed. Once you have been published, SciPost will publish, well, first the documentation paper itself, and it will be bundled up together with your code base release. this notion of a bundle is allowing us to be more flexible with the type of content that we publish. And you will also get the publication on the SciPost website of the code-based release and a copy of the package or software as it was at the time of peer review. Now, going back a little bit, this notion of a bundle is also helping us, allowing to have updates of the software. After you have published with us, you will still maintain your software. You may add new functionalities, and after a while, you may release a new version of it. Well, you can also submit it so that we consider it. The new version goes again through peer review, and it will be added to this bundle. And the first paper, which is this one, is currently going the peer review process for the next version release. Now, this addresses the needs for publishing venues software. However, we are still lacking a very good incentive for authors to publish their entire data, raw data if possible. And we are working with the idea of developing a specific publication venue for your datasets, SciPost physics datasets. Just like for code bases, this is a dedicated venue where you will publish your dataset along with a documentation paper where you'll describe the protocols you have followed to obtain this data, how it is meant to be processed, what are the software requirements that you need for processing it, producing the plots that you're showing and whatnot. And the data itself is going to be the product. So the data itself is going to be peer reviewed along with your documentation of it. We have discussed yesterday a little bit that sometimes the issue in peer review is that the referees will not necessarily interrogate your data. They will focus mostly on the results and the description you make of your results in your paper. Well, here we invite the referees to specifically look at your data set. As with all SciPost journals, this will be the peer witness refereeing process. So anybody who has doubts on a data set can ask for more data or more descriptions of it. And like in code bases, these datasets publications can be bundled up with other type of content. So on top of your dataset release, you can have your, let's say, regular research paper that can be bundled together with the dataset. We're also thinking of inviting authors who have already published with SciPost to send us their datasets that back up their existing publications to publish them and peer review them separately. So that is to say, to conclude, in my view, scientific publishers have a big responsibility to enable the scientific community in their reproducibility and replicability attempts, and that open publishing practices can foster reproducible science. Thank you very much.
And yeah, sure, please.
Interesting information about your journal. But I particularly didn't know and find it intriguing that you have this possibility for submitted paper to be available to everybody and for people submitting unsolicited referral reports. I'm not 100% sure that is a good idea, but it's an interesting idea. And with all due respect, your journal is just a very small subset of all things. And I'm wondering whether it's not a question to you, but to everybody else in the audience, where other journals are thinking about that, considering, or if anybody, maybe it's a good question for the panel discussion, because that seems as a risky but very interesting proposition. No. They were discussing considering putting the putting after. That's very, very big difference.
Yes. Well, I think, again, in my view, the role of scientific publishers is to provide tools to the scientific community. We give guidelines on how these tools have to be used, and in particular with the referee reports. We do have a vetting step to make sure the discussion is appropriate. But I think it's very useful for the entire scientific community to be able to pitch in on the consideration of the research that we're evaluating. It can be very useful, for instance, in multidisciplinary approaches where it can be very challenging to find a subset of just 2 or 3 referees that's going to be enough to consider an entire manuscript. And then enabling the entire diverse scientific communities to pitch in, each of them from their own expertise, gives a more broad evaluation of multidisciplinary papers.
Hi, thanks for the talk. And I love the model that you're trying to set up here. I find it really philosophically appealing overall. So thanks for all your work. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more specifically about what the review guidelines look like and how they might be different for papers versus code versus, I guess, this data set thing that you're looking to spin up. And you know, in particular, what do you ask reviewers to do for the code? And how do you kind of ensure that they're checking all the pieces that you would hope that they would?
For the code in particular, we ask more about, for instance, how easy it is to use the code based on the documentation that the authors provide. Some comments that we have received, for instance, in the referee reports, was that the instructions were not sufficient to install the code, that the benchmarking that they show, well, it's not easy to reproduce because they're not explaining exactly the steps they're following to obtain these results. So I think in general, when sharing code, this is a big struggle. Maybe the code is available, but if you don't know how to use it, that is not useful. So the refereeing process here, the referee is asked to check the usability of the code and whether it is scientifically accurate and useful. Does it actually answer to a need of the physics community? Yes.
Thank you for the talk. Very interesting. My question is more from a publisher perspective, as being a representative of Nature here, and it's a practical question. Is in the peer witness review process that you're using, you're still lining up reviewers yourselves?
Yes.
Yeah, and then it's open for. I mean, what sort of success rate are you having with the unsolicited reviews? And the reason I asked this, I should say slightly vested interest, because we ran this a similar trial several years ago called Nature Proceedings, where we would post up the preprint of the paper. We'd invite reviewers who would comment and the reviews would go live, and it was open to anyone else to comment. We stopped it eventually because the level of engagement was very, very low. And we didn't feel we were getting any added value from opening it up. And I'm very intrigued to know how you've solved that problem.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a problem. The scientific community can decide by themselves when it's necessary to pitch in on top of the invited referees. As you already see, the referee reports published alongside the preprint as the refereeing process goes. If you see that a report already addresses your concerns, there's no need for you to send another report that does that. So I think this is a tool that can be used mostly when the referee process is not necessarily addressing issues that you're seeing or when you disagree with the way the process is going. So actually, I see the fact, well, our rate of uptake, let's say, I think about 2 or 3% of our reports are volunteered as opposed to invited. But I think those are in the cases where someone actually has something to say about it. Now, it is also true that this is a tool that may be not so well known in the community. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity to publicize it a bit more and invite all of you to take it. We have the tool running. It doesn't cost us any extra effort to maintaining, so we will just keep it. It's up to you to use it. Right, yeah.
I have a question. Do you also publish experimental papers, and what are the guidelines?
We publish experimental papers. The guidelines are similar. We do have editors that are specialized on their fields, so they have the experience of what kind of research they're looking for, what kind of data needs to accompany the paper. But for us, the guidelines, we have a journal that serves the entire physics community. The guidelines are similar to all the communities. It mostly focuses on high quality research.
Any other question from the audience? Oh.
Comments for experimental labs. I'd say that kind of precision, software kind of expect people to kind of give up the software right away, as opposed to say 6 months or a year later. But no one would make a similar expectation.
I don't think anyone will expect to visit your lab, but I think, well, I mean, visit eventually, yes, but
put it up there right away with my first results.
I think that's a good practice in the research environment. We are giving credit to you for publishing your software. You will get citations or you should get citations if someone uses your code. If you have a lab, well, for practical reasons, it's more difficult to share your lab, but I imagine you can also have visitors who will come for a temporary visit and use your lab for their scientific results as well, and you will be part of the publications. It can happen sometimes. But moreover, in the peer review process, I think it is important for an experimentalist to accurately describe the tools they are using. So a good description of their tools should enable other labs to also create a similar setup. I think that's where the similarity would be. And the differences are more on the practical side of how feasible it is to reuse your lab, which is a physical object, as opposed to software, which can be replicated infinitely.